So, good morning, folks. In an unusual turn of events, we're not actually in the middle of any particular sermon series. So, Jeff and June and I have been pretty much left to our own devices in terms of what we'd preach on for the past couple of weeks, which can be kind of fun for a preacher. Fear not, Lent is coming and there will be a series then. But in the meantime, I've had the opportunity to do a little studying on something that's been nagging in the back of my mind since Sunday school days. When I was a little kid growing up in the Baptist Sunday school, the latest thing in high-tech learning tools was not computers, not PowerPoint slides, not Davy and Goliath claymation videos, not even overhead projectors, but something called flannel graphs. And I'm going to try and show you what that means. So with any luck, you're seeing what a flannel graph is. So that's how long ago I was in Sunday school, just slightly after Gutenberg invented movable types. And if you've never heard of flannel graphs, that's unsurprising. Basically, they're a board covered with flannel cloth to which the Sunday school teachers would apply little flannel-backed paper figures so they'd stick to the cloth. And these would be representing the characters in a biblical story. So the Sunday school teachers weren't just talking heads. They'd have something to hold our attention. And the figures were colorful and slightly cartoonish, and they illustrated whatever point the Sunday school teacher was trying to make that Sunday. And one of the stories that I most loved for the colorful pictures was the one that Eileen read for us this morning from the 11th chapter of the 11th chapter of the book of Genesis about the Tower of Babel. So we'll try again. There, the Tower of Babel. And most children who've attended Sunday school classes can tell you what happened at the Tower of Babel. King Nimrod wanted to be famous, so he convinced the people of Babylon, I guess he didn't so much convince as order, them to build a great tower that would reach up to heaven. And so God could see that the people were becoming prideful, and God decided to go down and mix up their languages so they couldn't understand each other. So in theory, this teaches us that pride is a bad thing, and supposedly it helps us understand where all the world's languages came from. So they said. The place where ancient Babylon existed is in present-day Iraq, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in what was called ancient Mesopotamia. And the earliest known civilization in Mesopotamia was the Sumerian Empire, which began about 2800 BCE, a very long time ago. And one of the things that the Sumerians did was they built towers, which are called ziggurats, and you can see the remains of those towers today. There. And that's a picture of one of the best preserved ones as it exists now, with a bit of restoration. And they built these exactly the way the Bible describes them. The Bible is very accurate on this point. They were built of baked clay bricks held together with bitumen. As Eileen read, and they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. And bitumen is a kind of a natural asphalt. It seeps up from the ground in the ancient Near East as kind of a tar-like thing, and it held the bricks together like cement. Fast forward from ancient history to semi-current events, 20th century anyway. About 20 plus years ago, during the first Gulf War, I read in the news that the United States Army in Iraq turned over a large portion of central Iraq to the control of a multinational force of soldiers from more than 20 different nations, which was led by the Polish army. I swear this is not a Polish joke. It included folks from Hungary to Honduras, from Spain to the Ukraine, more than 20 different countries, and over a dozen languages. And the news story said that the Polish officers, quote, acknowledge that communication is a potential problem, unquote. No kidding. The story also said that the ceremony itself gave a foretaste of the difficulties. The Iraqi governor of Babel province, it's still called Babel to this day. Anyhow, he gave a speech in Arabic, which was followed by a translation, but only into Polish. And the US troops and all the other troops applauded politely, although they had absolutely no idea what had been said. It gets better. In the truly ironic part, the ceremony handing over control of this area was held in an ancient amphitheater of dusty, pale yellow brick at the site of ancient Babylon, about 50 miles from Baghdad in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, near the place archaeologists believe to be the location of ruins that may have been regarded in ancient times as the Tower of Babel. Kid you not. But really, I mean, what's so wrong with building a tower, especially when you consider the fact that we build towers, skyscrapers, all the time these days? Like that. Back in Sunday school with the flannel graphs, it was suggested to me that they were actually trying to build the tower all the way up to heaven. Now, I didn't know the word hubris at the time, but it kind of means excessive pride or overweening self-confidence. And in ancient stories, it generally precedes a disastrous fall for people. Genesis does suggest that the problem may have been pride, but I don't think that's the whole problem. I think my Sunday school teachers, God bless them, missed the forest for the trees. I think the real problem is that towers are symbols of military might and exclusion. When I was in seminary, my Hebrew scriptures professor had a different take on the Tower of Babel, and he said that some modern biblical interpretation sees the story of the Tower of Babel as an argument against cities. Cities in the ancient Near East were the original gated communities. And that does make a certain kind of sense. However, the Bible may talk about a thing here and there, but as my Sunday school teachers kind of did sometimes, we often miss its overarching themes because we're just looking for a few verses to lob at our opponents. And, you know, with 66 plus books to choose from, there's no shortage of things to lob. But I think it's helpful to actually talk about what's in the Bible, not what we'd like to be there, or what biblically illiterate charlatans have told us for generations is in there. It's easy to forget that the Bible is overwhelmingly rural. It was primarily written by and about poor nomads struggling to create an identity and experience a semblance of stability. And it was written primarily by people who were inherently tribal, and yet the overarching story is one of God pushing those people beyond their own narrow-mindedness. And generally, this does translate into a bias against cities, and viscerally related to those ancient cities, walls and towers. Now, it's important to remember that this anti-city bias is nothing akin to today's white supremacist BS with talk of sketchy neighborhoods in the inner city. I think it's rooted in something entirely different, in the inhospitality and cruelty of cities and their walls. Y'all know what hostile architecture is? It's an urban design strategy where things are built so as to deter people from using them. And things like park benches with dividers so that homeless people can't lie down and rest their bodies. Things like spikes on ledges and on in the nooks and crannies of buildings so that people can't lay down. They can't even sit and drink their coffee. Stuff like that specifically targets people who use or rely on public space more than others, such as youth, poor people, and homeless people. And towers in biblical times are the epitome of hostile architecture. Towers and walls formed an integral aspect of ancient cities. And we see this ancient anti-city bias from the very beginning in the Tower of Babel, in Egypt, in Sodom and Gomorrah as specific examples of human degradation, which, as we know, was inhospitality, not sexual orientation, but I digress. And walls are part of this anti-city ethic. They formed that integral aspect of ancient cities, walls to delineate where the city stopped, and most importantly, to keep them safe from the violent chaos behind. And this obsession with safety and an understanding of outsiders as other, or worse, as enemy, goes against the very nature of the divine identity and against what it means to experience the overwhelming power of love and a peace that is justice-oriented, not simply safety because of a wall. And those kinds of defenses were never meant to be a part of God's beloved community. They stand against everything that a God of love and peace stands for. Towers in the Bible represent power and aggression and exclusion, and they are part of the walls that keep out people who don't look like us or love like us or believe like us. Pretty much the antithesis of what a loving God wants for us. Pretty much the opposite of the realm of God that we're supposed to be building here on earth. There's a lovely old poem by a guy named Edwin Markham. I know nothing about him except he wrote a poem I really like called Outwitted. It goes like this. He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in. No walls, no strong towers, just love and vulnerability. And that's how you build a strong community. And once we hit the first century context of Jesus, we still see that this sense that cities with their walls and towers and their hostile architecture are inherently broken because of the defensiveness with which they surround themselves. And yes, I'm making a point that can be applied both to cities and to people. Inherently broken because of the defensiveness with which they surround themselves. This anti-wall bias, this vulnerability, if you will, flows through Jesus' life and words and ministry, which we as people of faith claim as our standard. We are called to live without walls, without strong towers, without the defenses that the world tells us we need, but with the unconditional love and grace of God as our sole protection. I think MCC has torn down a lot of walls. And I think Toronto is a great city. It's known for being one of the most cosmopolitan, most diverse cities in the world. And that is one of the things I love about it. And yet, with apologies to the late, great Mel Lastman, it's not just one big megacity. It's actually a city of neighborhoods. In some ways, we're still kind of tribal. But if we're about building beloved community in this place and from this place, then we need to continually resist the urge to rebuild the metaphorical walls that God calls us to tear down. Because in the realm of God, there are no tribes, no factions, no political parties, no cliques. The song we sang at the beginning of this service, All Are Welcome, has some words that may prove instructive to us. Let us build a house where love can dwell and all can safely live, a place where saints and children tell how hearts learn to forgive, built of hopes and dreams and visions, rock of faith and vault of grace. Here the love of Christ shall end divisions. All are welcome. All are welcome. All are welcome in this place. Let this be a place with no walls. Amen. Amen.